My name is Evelyn Harper, and the day I stood in a white hospital room watching officers snap cold metal handcuffs around my mother's wrists, while I calmly handed the prosecutor a voice recorder, I knew I had avenged the cruelest betrayal of my life. My own parents, trying to have me declared insane to steal my husband's estate. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from, because I need to know I'm not the only woman who has ever buried her husband, and then had to bury her trust in her own family. It started at Rose Hill Cemetery in Charleston, South Carolina, on a wind-bitten Thursday morning, where I stood alone beside my husband's grave and realized something was terribly wrong. The priest had already left. The groundskeeper was pretending not to stare at the widow who hadn't shed a single tear. My black coat clung to me like armor I didn't remember putting on. "Where is everyone?" I whispered to the fresh mound of earth. The wind answered instead, sharp and indifferent. "Daniel Harper, my husband of 9 years, the man who fixed leaky faucets at midnight and kissed my forehead every morning, was gone. A sudden aneurysm. No warning, just a phone call and a hospital corridor that smelled like antiseptic and finality." I looked behind me again. Empty rows of folding chairs. No cousins. No neighbors, not even my parents. I pulled out my phone with fingers that didn't feel like mine and dialed my mother. She answered on the third ring. "Evelyn, Mom, where are you?" My voice sounded small, like it belonged to a child lost in a grocery store. A pause, too long. "It's fine, sweetheart," she said gently, too gently. "People grieve in their own way." "In their own way," I repeated, staring at Daniel's name carved into stone. "It's his funeral." "Your father isn't feeling well," she added quickly. "And it might be better if we give you space. You've been fragile." Fragile. The words slid under my skin. "I'm not fragile," I said, but she had already begun her retreat. "We'll talk later. Go home and rest. That's what you need." The line went dead. I stood there for a long moment, phone still pressed to my ear, listening to nothing. Daniel's older brother, Mark, had texted the night before saying work kept him in Atlanta. My parents claimed illness. Even my younger sister Lee had sent a vague message. "Thinking of you, couldn't make it, couldn't make it." I knelt beside the grave, finally allowing my composure to crack, not into tears but into something colder. "They didn't come," I murmured. "Not one of them." Daniel used to joke that my family loved comfort more than people. I'd always defended them. "They're just practical," I would say, practical, efficient, polite, absent. I brushed a bit of dirt from the headstone as if tidying his collar. "I'm still here," I told him quietly. "And I'm not going to fall apart." That was my goal from the very beginning. I would survive this with dignity. I would protect whatever Daniel left behind, our memories, our home, our future plans, and I would not let grief swallow me whole. But standing there alone, a question crept in that I didn't yet know would change everything. Why didn't they want to be seen beside me? As I rose to leave, I noticed something else. 2 rows back, one of the chairs had been knocked over. No footprints in the damp soil around it, almost as if someone had come and changed their mind. I shook the thought away. Paranoia thrives in grief, I told myself. When I reached my car, my hands finally began to tremble. I rested my forehead against the steering wheel. "Pull yourself together, Evelyn," I whispered. "You don't get to collapse." Daniel used to call me his quiet storm. Calm on the outside, relentless underneath. I started the engine. As I drove away from the cemetery, gray clouds pressing low over the city, I had no idea that my loneliness at that grave was not an accident. It was the first move in a game I didn't yet know I was playing. And I had just been left alone on the board. That evening, in Marla Jensen's small brick apartment on King Street, I finally let the silence inside me crack. Marla has been my best friend since freshman year at the College of Charleston, the kind of woman who swears softly, loves fiercely, and keeps peppermint gum in every purse she owns. She opened the door before I even knocked twice. "Oh, Ev," she breathed, pulling me into her. I didn't realize how rigid I'd been until her arms wrapped around me. My body softened like ice melting. "You smell like cold air," she said, guiding me inside. "And cemetery." "Accurate," I murmured. Her apartment was glowing with lamplight. No overhead lights, just warmth. The scent of chamomile drifted from the kitchen. "Sit," she ordered gently. "Tea first, breakdown second." I sat on her faded blue couch, staring at the steam rising from the mug she pressed into my hands. "So," she said carefully, lowering herself across from me, knees almost touching mine. "Who showed up?" I stared into the tea. "No one," she blinked. No one is in, as in folding chairs for ghosts. Her jaw tightened. Your parents, apparently grieving in their own way. I gave a hollow laugh, which looks a lot like not coming. Marla swore under her breath. That's not grieving, that's avoiding. I kept thinking they'd walk up late, I admitted, like some dramatic entrance, but it was just wind. My voice trembled then, finally betraying me. I thought they would care. Marla leaned forward immediately. They should care, Daniel was family. He was better family than most of mine, I whispered. Reached for my hand. You're not alone, Evelyn, you hear me, you don't have to go through this alone. The words hit something fragile inside me. My composure shattered quietly, no sobbing, no theatrical collapse, just steady tears sliding down my face. I don't understand it, I said. It's like I became inconvenient the moment he died. Marla tilted her head. What do you mean? I hesitated. There was something in my mom's voice, like she was managing me, not comforting me, managing. That's. Marla said slowly. Did she say anything specific? She called me fragile. Marla's eyes narrowed. Fragile how? I don't know, I wiped my cheeks. Like I might break or embarrass them, or I stopped myself. Or what? She pressed gently. Or cost them something. The words surprised even me. Marla leaned back, studying me. Okay, back up. Has anything else felt off? I thought about the empty chairs, the knocked-over one, the careful tone in my mother's voice. No, I said automatically. Then quieter, maybe. Marla stood and paced once, thinking, that's what she does, she moves when she thinks. Listen to me, she said finally, kneeling in front of me now. Grief does weird things to families, but absence at a funeral, that's not weird, that's deliberate. I swallowed. You think they avoided it on purpose? I don't know, she admitted. But I do know this, you just lost your husband. Anyone who adds loneliness to that is failing you. The kettle clicked softly in the kitchen, though it had already boiled. The room felt too small for the questions forming in my head. I can't fall apart, I whispered. Daniel left things unfinished. The house, paperwork, accounts, I need to handle it. Marla squeezed my hand. Then we'll handle it, together. Tomorrow I'll go with you to whatever you need. I nodded slowly. I just want to protect what's left, I said. That's my goal, protect it, protect myself. Marla gave me a look I couldn't quite read. Then start by protecting your peace tonight, she said softly. Stay here. For the first time all day, I exhaled fully. Outside, Charleston traffic hummed faintly. Inside, the lamps glowed warm and steady. And somewhere beneath my grief, something else stirred. Not fear, not yet, but awareness. Because loneliness is one thing, but coordinated absence, that feels different. The next morning, in a polished law office overlooking the Charleston harbor, I sat across from Daniel's attorney and prepared myself for paperwork, nothing more. The firm of Clements and Rowe occupied the 12th floor of a glass building downtown. Everything inside smelled faintly of leather and lemon polish. It felt too pristine for grief. Mrs. Harper, said Mr. Thomas Clements, a silver-haired man in his early 60s who had handled Daniel's small construction business for years. First, let me say how deeply sorry I am. Thank you, I replied, folding my hands in my lap to keep them from shaking. I'd just like to finalize whatever needs finalizing. He studied me for a moment. Of course. Folders were arranged neatly in front of him. My name was printed on several tabs. This meeting, he continued, is to review Daniel's will and initiate the transfer of assets. I nodded stiffly. We'd always kept things simple. A modest home on James Island. Some savings, his truck, the business equipment. Nothing dramatic. Mr. Clements opened the first folder. There's something you need to see, I braced myself. Daniel updated his will 8 months ago. Updated, I frowned. He didn't mention that. He wanted it to be a surprise, actually. A faint smile tugged at his mouth. He was quite proud of it. Proud, Mr. Clements slid a document across the desk. Your husband left you 3 apartment units in Mount Pleasant and a beachfront property on Sullivan's Island. For a second, I thought I had misheard him. I'm sorry, what? 3 fully paid rental properties, he repeated calmly. And the Sullivan's Island house, you are the sole beneficiary. The room seemed to tilt. This must be a mistake. No mistake. He adjusted his glasses. Daniel invested quietly over the past 5 years. He was building long-term security. For you. My throat tightened. He never said anything. He instructed me not to, Mr. Clements replied gently. He said you worry too much. He wanted you protected. Protected. I stared at the numbers on the page, property values. rental income statements, insurance policies. This wasn't modest, this was substantial. I don't understand, I whispered. Daniel's construction company expanded more than publicly known. He partnered in several developments early on. He was strategic. A strange mix of pride and disbelief washed over me. He always said he was planning ahead, I murmured. Mr. Clements nodded. He was, thoroughly. I leaned back in the leather chair, my pulse racing. So everything comes to me. Yes, the apartments generate steady income. The beachfront house is deeded entirely in your name as of today. Silence filled the office. Yesterday I stood alone at my husband's grave. Today I was being told I owned more property than I'd ever imagined. I don't even know what to say. You don't need to say anything, Mr. Clements said kindly. You simply need time. But time wasn't what my mind latched onto, it latched onto something else. Why had my parents called me fragile? Why had they avoided the funeral? Had they known? No, that was ridiculous. I forced a breath. What happens next? I asked, steadying myself. We'll file the transfer documents immediately. I recommend you refrain from making any major decisions until you've processed everything. I gave a small, stunned laugh. That might take a while. That's understandable. As I stood to leave, Mr. Clements added quietly, Your husband was very clear about one thing. I paused. What's that? That this ensures you will never have to depend on anyone. The words followed me into the elevator. Never have to depend on anyone. Outside, the harbor glittered under pale sunlight. Boats drifted calmly, unaware that my entire reality had shifted in under an hour. Daniel hadn't just loved me, he had fortified me. And suddenly my parents' absence at the funeral felt heavier, because grief makes you fragile. But inheritance makes you valuable. And as I walked toward my car, a slow, uneasy realization settled in my chest. If anyone else discovered what Daniel left me, everything might change. That night, just after 10, I pulled into my parents' driveway with a suitcase in the back seat and Daniel's inheritance heavy on my mind. Their house in West Ashley looked exactly as it always had, white shutters, warm porch light, predictable, safe. I told myself staying here temporarily made sense. I wasn't ready to sit alone in the house Daniel and I had shared. The silence there felt too loud. My mother, Patricia Whitmore, had texted earlier, You can stay as long as you need. As long as I need, I let myself in quietly. The familiar creak of the hallway floorboard near the coat closet hadn't changed in 20 years. I didn't announce myself. Voices drifted from the kitchen, my mother's first. Once the doctor declares her unfit, we take control. She won't know what hit her. I froze, every nerve in my body sharpened. My father, Harold Whitmore, a man of few words and quieter loyalties, responded in a low murmur. We'll start small. Just a few sedatives in her tea, she's already unstable. Unstable, the word echoed, my mother sighed softly. It has to look natural, grief, confusion, poor Evelyn. My heart slammed against my ribs so violently I thought they might hear it. She met with the lawyer this morning, my father added. If she signs anything before we act, she won't, my mother cut in calmly. I spoke to Dr. Kessler. He understands the situation. He'll evaluate her next week. Dr. Kessler. Our longtime family physician. I pressed my back against the hallway wall, the soft glow from the kitchen casting long shadows across the floor. She can't manage that kind of money alone, my mother continued. It would destroy her, we're protecting her from herself. Destroy her, the air felt thin. She doesn't even suspect anything, my father muttered. A pause, then my mother's voice, gentle, almost affectionate. She's always trusted us. Something inside me cracked, not loudly, not dramatically. Just a clean, silent fracture. I stepped backward carefully, avoiding the loose board near the baseboard heater. They were talking about me, about declaring me mentally unfit, about sedating me, about taking control. Of what? The inheritance. The pieces aligned with brutal clarity. The absence at the funeral, the word fragile. The careful tone. They knew, maybe not the full numbers but enough to plan. My mother's chair scraped softly against tile. Tomorrow night, she said. We'll start easing her into rest. She hasn't been sleeping anyway. I swallowed hard. This wasn't grief-induced paranoia. This was strategy. I moved silently toward the front door, my pulse steadying into something colder than fear. Calculation. If they believed I hadn't arrived yet, that was my advantage. I slipped back outside without a sound. The porch light hummed faintly overhead. My car sat exactly where I'd left it. For a long moment, I stood there, staring at the house I had once believed was my safest place. Inside were my parents. Inside was a plan, and they believed I was weak enough not to see it. I opened my car door slowly and slid into the driver's seat. My hands trembled only once, then stopped. "You raised me," I whispered into the darkness. "You should know better." I wasn't fragile. I wasn't unstable. And I certainly wasn't about to let anyone medicate me into submission. As I drove away from the house without turning on my headlights until the corner, one truth crystallized in my mind. They had just made the first real move. But they had underestimated one thing. I had heard everything. The next evening, at my parents' oak dining table beneath the chandelier I grew up dusting every Sunday, I smiled like a daughter who trusted everything in front of her. I had returned that afternoon, this time loudly, rolling my suitcase in through the front door. "Oh, sweetheart," my mother exclaimed, rushing toward me with outstretched arms. "We were worried when you didn't come last night." "I needed air," I replied lightly. "Grief does that." My father gave a solemn nod from the living room. "You look tired." "I am," I said, meeting his eyes just long enough. Let them believe that. Dinner smelled like rosemary and beef stew. Comfort food. Strategic comfort food. My younger sister Lee sat across from me. Lee Whitmore, 2 years younger, perpetually agreeable and often too eager to keep peace. "I'm so glad you're here," she chirped. "The house felt weird without you." "Weird how?" I asked calmly. She hesitated. "Just quiet." My mother set a delicate porcelain teacup beside my plate. "Chamomile," she said sweetly. "It'll help you sleep." I smiled. "Thank you." I did not touch it. We passed bowls around the table. I deliberately served myself only from dishes everyone else had already eaten from. "Mom, this stew tastes great," I said, lifting a spoonful slowly. Her eyes watched me too closely. "I added something special," she replied. "Oh," I kept my tone casual. "Just extra herbs," she said smoothly. Under the table, my hands were steady now. The trembling had passed, because fear is loud, strategy is quiet. My father cleared his throat. "You've always been sensitive to stress, Evelyn." I swallowed deliberately. "Have I?" "You internalize," he continued. "It's not healthy." Lee nodded a little too eagerly. "You didn't even cry at the funeral." I looked at her. "There was no one there to see it," I said softly. Silence fell for half a second too long. My mother recovered first. "Everyone grieves differently." "Yes," I agreed. "You mentioned that." She held my gaze. The teacup sat untouched at my right hand. Steam no longer rose from it. "You should drink your tea," she said gently. "I will," I replied. I didn't. Instead, I took another bite of stew. I said, tilting my head slightly, "What's Dr. Kessler up to these days?" My mother's spoon paused midair. "Why do you ask?" "Oh, no reason," I shrugged lightly. "I thought maybe I should schedule a checkup since I'm apparently fragile." My father shifted in his seat. "No one said fragile," he muttered. My mother smiled thinly. "We're just concerned." "About what?" "Your ability to handle everything," she answered. "Daniel handled finances. You never liked numbers." That was almost funny. "I met with his lawyer yesterday," I said evenly. "I think I'll manage." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Lee blinked. "Already?" "Yes, paperwork doesn't wait." My mother folded her napkin with deliberate care. "That seems fast." "Efficiency runs in the family," I replied. I lifted the teacup then slowly, deliberately, and brought it near my lips. 3 pairs of eyes tracked the movement. Instead of drinking, I paused. "It's still too hot," I said casually, setting it back down untouched. My mother's smile tightened. Dinner continued with surface-level conversation. Weather, grocery prices, Lee's job at the boutique downtown, but beneath it something else moved. A silent chess game. Every word measured, every glance recorded. When plates were cleared, my mother picked up my teacup. "You barely touched this." "I'm not very thirsty," I said gently. She studied me for a beat too long. "That's all right," she said. "There's always tomorrow." I stood slowly. "Yes," I agreed, meeting her eyes. "There is." As I walked upstairs to my old bedroom, the familiar wallpaper felt foreign. They believed I was grieving and vulnerable. They believed they were guiding events, but tonight had proven something critical. They were watching me, which meant they were nervous, and nervous people make mistakes. I closed my bedroom door softly and leaned against it. The house was quiet again, but not safe, not anymore. Later that night, just after 11, there was a soft knock on my bedroom door. "Evelyn." My mother's voice floated through the wood. "I brought you something." I opened the door slowly. She stood there in her pale blue robe, holding a steaming mug. The scent of chamomile rose gently between us. "You look tense at dinner," she said tenderly. "This will help." Behind her, my father lingered at the end of the hallway, pretending to adjust a picture frame. I accepted the mug with both hands. "Thank you," I said. Her eyes searched my face. "You're not sleeping well, are you?" "Not really." "That's natural," she replied. "But we'll get you back to yourself." "Back to myself." "I'm sure you will," I said softly. They waited a beat too long before retreating down the hallway. I closed my door. The steam curled upward in delicate spirals, harmless looking. I walked calmly downstairs instead of toward my bed. The living room was dark except for the streetlight filtering through the curtains. In the corner stood my mother's prized fern, a large, thirsty plant in a ceramic pot. I knelt beside it. "Well," I whispered, tipping the mug slowly into the soil, "let's see how deep this goes." The liquid disappeared quickly into the dirt. I set the empty mug on the side table and returned upstairs, leaving it on my nightstand where they would expect it. Then I lay in bed and waited. Morning came with a deliberate knock. "Sweetheart," my father called gently. "Doctor's appointment today." I opened the door slowly, blinking as if the light bothered me. "Oh," I murmured faintly. "Right." My mother touched my forehead. "You feel warm." "I feel fuzzy," I said, letting my eyelids droop slightly. Concern flashed across her face, but not maternal concern, anticipation. "They drove me to Dr. Raymond Kessler's office at 10. Dr. Kessler has known me since childhood, thin, meticulous, always faintly nervous. He greeted me with clinical politeness. "Evelyn," he said, gesturing to the examination chair. "Your parents mentioned you've been struggling." I slumped slightly as I sat. "Just tired," I mumbled. My mother stood near the wall. "She's not herself, forgetful, disoriented." "I see," he said carefully. He ran through routine cognitive tests, dates, memory recall, basic coordination. I answered slowly but correctly. "What day is it?" he asked. "Thursday," I murmured. "And the president?" I gave the correct name without hesitation. He checked my pulse, my reflexes, my pupils, everything normal. My father cleared his throat. "She's been confused at home." "Have I?" I blinked mildly. Dr. Kessler glanced between us. "Evelyn," he said gently, "do you feel unable to manage your daily affairs?" I lifted my gaze to his. "No," I said clearly. The shift in my tone was subtle but deliberate. He paused. "Have you experienced hallucinations, blackouts?" "No." Silence filled the room. My mother stepped forward. "Doctor, grief can cause delayed reactions. We're worried she might make poor financial decisions in this state." There it was, financial. Dr. Kessler's expression changed almost imperceptibly. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said slowly, "I see no clinical indication that your daughter is impaired." My father stiffened. "But she appears tired," he continued, voice tightening slightly, "which is understandable given recent events. I recommend rest, not intervention." I straightened in the chair just a fraction. "Guess I just needed some rest," I said calmly. Dr. Kessler's eyes flicked to mine. For a split second, something passed between us. Awareness, understanding, my mother's jaw tightened. "So there's no need for further evaluation?" she pressed. "Not at this time," he replied firmly. The drive home was silent. My mother's fingers gripped the steering wheel too tightly. I leaned back in the seat, gaze drifting out the window. They had expected confirmation. Instead, they received nothing. And now they knew something else. I wasn't collapsing. When we pulled into the driveway, my father opened my door. "You should rest," he said stiffly. "I will," I replied. As I stepped out of the car, I caught my reflection in the side mirror. Calm, clear, not fragile, not unstable, just awake. And if they wanted to play careful games with my future, I was ready to play back. Just after midnight, when the house had settled into its familiar pattern of creaks and soft breathing through walls, I stepped into the hallway barefoot. My parents' bedroom door was closed. A thin line of light glowed beneath it for a moment, then darkness. I waited. 5 minutes. 10. The rhythmic murmur of my father's snore began. My mother's softer breathing followed. I moved. The hallway vent outside their bedroom had always rattled slightly in winter. I'd noticed it since I was 12. Tonight it became useful. From the pocket of my robe, I pulled a tiny voice recorder, no bigger than my thumb. I had bought it that afternoon at an electronics store downtown, telling the clerk I needed it for interviews. Not a lie, just not the whole truth. I crouched slowly, easing the vent cover loose with careful fingers. The metal made the faintest scrape and I froze. No movement from inside the room. My pulse thudded in my ears. Carefully, I slid the recorder into the duct just far enough to capture sound but not be visible. I secured the cover back in place and leaned back against the wall. If they want a game, I whispered into the darkness, they'll get one. Back in my bedroom, I didn't sleep. At 6:30 a.m., I retrieved the device while my parents were downstairs making coffee. My hands were steady. I didn't listen to it there. I drove straight to Marla's apartment. She opened the door still in pajama shorts, hair in a messy bun. "You look like you haven't blinked," she said immediately. I stepped inside, and the moment the door closed, my composure dissolved. "They want to destroy me," I said, my voice breaking despite myself. Marla wrapped her arms around me without hesitation. "What happened?" "I heard them. They planned to sedate me, to have me declared unfit. The doctor didn't cooperate, so now they're regrouping." Marla pulled back, her eyes flashing. "You're sure?" I held up the recorder. "I'm about to be." We sat on her couch. My fingers hovered over the play button for a moment. "You don't have to do this alone," she said softly. I nodded and pressed play. Static crackled, then my mother's voice. "We gave her too little, she barely seemed affected." My father responded, low and irritated. "Next time, double it." My stomach dropped. "The doctor didn't sign," my mother continued. "He hesitated." "We'll make him see reason," my father muttered. "Once she's clearly unstable, he won't have a choice." Marla's hand tightened around mine. "She met with the lawyer," my mother said. "We can't let her control those assets." "Not in this state." Assets, there it was, clear as daylight. The recording continued, discussing timing, dosage, appearances. I stopped it. The room felt too small. "They're talking about me like I'm an obstacle," I whispered. "You are," Marla said quietly. "An obstacle between them and money." Tears burned my eyes again, but this time they weren't helpless. "They're my parents." "And they're committing a crime," she replied firmly. Silence hung between us. Marla stood abruptly and began pacing. "My brother works in the prosecutor's office," she said. I looked up. "Ethan?" "Yes, assistant district attorney. He handles fraud and elder abuse cases." "I'm not elderly," I said weakly. "You're being targeted for financial control. It counts." She stopped pacing and faced me. "He'll know what to do." Fear and relief collided in my chest. "If I go to the authorities," I said slowly, "there's no going back." Marla knelt in front of me, taking both my hands. "They already crossed the line, Evelyn. You didn't." I stared at the recorder in my palm, a small piece of plastic, heavy with proof. "I just wanted to protect what Daniel left me," I whispered. "Then protect it," she said. For the first time since the funeral, I felt something solid beneath my grief. Resolve. "They think I'm fragile," I said quietly. Marla gave a tight smile. "Let them." I wiped my face and straightened my shoulders. "Call your brother." That evening, in the quiet of Marla's kitchen with the blinds drawn and the lights dimmed, I listened to the full recording again, this time with Ethan Jensen seated across from me. Ethan is 3 years older than Marla. Clean-cut, methodical, the kind of man who listens more than he speaks. He set his legal pad on the table and nodded for me to begin. I pressed play. The static filled the room, then my mother's voice, cool, controlled. "We gave her too little last time." She barely seemed affected. My father responded, irritated. "Next time, double the dose." Ethan's pen stopped moving. "The doctor already agreed," my father added. "He won't resist once it's obvious she can't manage herself." My throat tightened. Ethan lifted a hand slightly, signaling me to let it continue. My mother again. "It has to look progressive. Confusion, fatigue, poor decisions. We present it as concern." I stopped the recording. Silence pressed in around us. Marla crossed her arms tightly. "That's enough, right?" "That's criminal." Ethan leaned back slowly, eyes focused but sharp. "This is serious," he said gravely. My pulse quickened. "Serious enough." "Yes." His jaw tightened. "They're discussing intent to drug you and pursue fraudulent incapacity proceedings for financial control. That's conspiracy." A strange chill ran through me. "They're my parents," I whispered. "And they're planning a felony," he replied evenly. Marla reached for my hand. "What happens now?" I asked. Ethan tapped his pen against the legal pad thoughtfully. "The recording is strong," he said. "Very strong, but defense attorneys will argue context. They'll claim exaggeration, frustration, concern taken out of proportion." "They mention dosage," Marla snapped. "And that helps," he agreed. "But we need something airtight." My stomach dropped. "What does that mean?" "It means proof at the moment they act." The words hung heavy in the air. You want me to let them try again, I said quietly. Ethan met my gaze directly. I want them caught in the act of administering or attempting to administer something without your consent. Marla stiffened. That's risky. It is, Ethan said, but it guarantees intervention. We can coordinate with law enforcement. I felt the room tilt slightly. You're asking me to drink it, I whispered. I'm asking you to appear to, he corrected gently. Under supervision. I looked down at my hands. For weeks, I had felt hunted in my own childhood home. Now I was being asked to step deliberately into the trap. They think I'm fragile, I murmured. Ethan's expression softened slightly. You're not, and you won't be alone. He leaned forward, voice steady. We'll stage it carefully. If they attempt to sedate you again, we intercept immediately. The recording will establish premeditation. The act will confirm intent. Marla squeezed my hand harder. You don't have to do this, she said softly. I closed my eyes briefly. Daniel's voice echoed in my memory. I'm building security for you, so you never have to depend on anyone. He had protected me with assets. Now I had to protect myself with strategy. If I don't stop them, I said slowly, they'll escalate. Yes, Ethan replied. I inhaled deeply and nodded once. Then we finish this. Ethan gave a short nod of approval. I'll coordinate with my office discreetly. You go back home, act normal. Let them believe they're winning. A bitter smile touched my lips. They already believe that. Marla stood and pulled me into a tight embrace. Just promise me one thing, she whispered. What? Don't underestimate yourself the way they do. I stepped back, steady now. I won't. As I left the apartment that night, the air felt colder than before but clearer. They had planned my downfall carefully, but now their next move would be their last. And this time I would be ready. That night, back in my childhood bedroom with the pale yellow walls and the faint crack in the ceiling I used to trace as a girl, I stood in front of the mirror and studied my reflection like it belonged to someone else. You've survived worse, I whispered softly. Just one more lie to catch them all. The woman staring back at me didn't look fragile. She looked focused. Dinner had been quiet, too quiet. My mother had watched me with careful patience, as if waiting for the right moment to strike again. My father barely spoke, his eyes calculating behind his glasses. They were regrouping, which meant it wouldn't be long. I sat at my desk and checked my phone. A single message from Ethan, we're ready. Call the moment they move. Underneath it, another, you won't be alone. I exhaled slowly. The plan was simple in structure, terrifying in execution. If they offered the tea again, I would drink it. Enough to satisfy them. Not enough to lose awareness. Ethan had already coordinated with a detective from the county prosecutor's office. They would monitor the situation once I confirmed the attempt. Dr. Kessler would be under observation too. All I had to do was act. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. Evelyn, my mother's voice floated through the door. Come in, I answered, letting my tone carry a slight tremor. She entered with practiced gentleness. You seem tired today, she said. Are you sleeping at all? Not much, I admitted. She sat on the edge of my bed, brushing invisible lint from the comforter. We worry about you, she said quietly. You're carrying so much. I know, I replied. She studied my face as if looking for cracks. You trust us, don't you? She asked suddenly. The question was almost childlike. Yes, I said softly, and it was the biggest lie I had ever told. She smiled faintly, satisfied. Good, we only want what's best. When she left, I locked the door and sat on the edge of the bed, my pulse racing. They were close. The next afternoon, the moment arrived. My mother appeared in the kitchen doorway holding a delicate porcelain cup. Chamomile again, she said lightly. Stronger this time, you need real rest. Stronger. My father stood near the window, pretending to read the paper. I forced a small, weary smile. Maybe you're right. She handed me the cup. I felt the weight of it in my hands. This was it. I lifted it slowly to my lips. The scent was faintly bitter beneath the herbs. You don't have to watch me drink it, I said gently. My mother's expression remained serene. I know, but she didn't look away. I tilted the cup and swallowed, once, twice. Enough. My throat tightened slightly at the taste. There, I murmured, lowering the cup. Happy, my father folded his newspaper carefully. You'll feel better soon. I let my shoulders slump. The room blurred not from the tea, but from the act. I stood slowly, wobbling just slightly. Maybe I should lie down. That's a good idea, my mother said softly. As I walked toward the hallway, I pressed my phone inside my sweater and tapped the screen twice. the silent signal Ethan had instructed me to send. I reached my bedroom and closed the door halfway, leaving it slightly ajar as they would expect. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. Minutes passed, footsteps approached. My mother's whisper drifted through the gap. "It's working." My father's voice followed. "Call Kessler, tell him it's time." I lay still on the bed, eyelids heavy not from sedation but from anticipation. The next stage had begun, and this time they had no idea who was really watching. I lay on my childhood bed, the hallway light slicing across the carpet, and let my breathing grow slow and uneven. Outside my door, my mother's whisper trembled with excitement. "It's working." My father's voice followed lower. "Call Kessler, tell him it's time." I let my arm fall limply off the side of the bed. A few minutes later, my mother stepped inside. "Evelyn," she said softly. "Sweetheart." I didn't answer. She touched my shoulder. I forced a delayed reaction, an unfocused blink. There it is," she murmured under her breath. My father appeared behind her. She can barely keep her eyes open. "I'm just tired," I slurred carefully. My mother smoothed my hair back with theatrical tenderness. "It's okay, we're going to help you." "Help me." My phone, tucked under the pillow, vibrated once. Signal received. Everything after that unfolded in slow motion. They helped me into the car. I let my head roll slightly to the side, my limbs heavy but controlled. The world blurred intentionally as we drove. "Poor thing," my mother sighed. "She hasn't been right since the funeral." "She can't manage the properties like this," my father muttered. Properties. They couldn't even hide it anymore. We pulled into the small private medical building where Dr. Kessler had his after-hours office. The fluorescent lights inside were painfully white. I let them guide me down the hallway. Dr. Raymond Kessler stood waiting in a pressed lab coat, clipboard in hand. "She's deteriorated quickly," my mother said urgently. I blinked up at him, letting my gaze drift past his shoulder. "Daniel," I whispered faintly. My father exhaled sharply. "You see," Dr. Kessler hesitated. He stepped closer, shining a penlight into my eyes. "Evelyn," he said carefully, "do you know where you are?" "Home," I murmured vaguely. My mother's voice rose. "She thinks she's home." Dr. Kessler glanced at my parents. Something flickered in his expression, uncertainty. "We discussed this," my father pressed quietly. "You agreed." The doctor swallowed. He began speaking clinically. "Patient presenting acute dissociation, impaired judgment, inability to manage financial or personal affairs." My heart pounded so violently I thought it would give me away. He reached for a document on the desk. An incapacity certificate. Permanent monitoring, guardianship transfer. My mother's breathing quickened beside me. "This is for her own good," she whispered. Dr. Kessler lifted his pen. "Clearly unstable," he muttered under his breath, almost convincing himself. "Needs permanent supervision." The pen touched paper. And then the door exploded inward. Hands where we can see them. Armed officers flooded the room. My mother screamed. My father staggered back, face draining of color. Dr. Kessler dropped the pen as if it burned him. "What is this?" my father shouted. The lead detective stepped forward, badge glinting under fluorescent light. "Harold and Patricia Whitmore, step away from your daughter." My mother's voice cracked. "This is a mistake, she's sick." I sat up slowly on the examination table. Not confused, not fragile, steady. "No," I said clearly, "I'm not." The detective held up a small recording device. "We have documented evidence of conspiracy to administer sedatives without consent and pursue fraudulent guardianship." My father's eyes snapped to me. Yes," I said calmly. Officers moved swiftly, securing their wrists. "You tricked us," my mother shrieked as the cuffs clicked shut. I slid off the table, standing tall despite the tremor in my chest. "You tried to erase me," I replied quietly. Dr. Kessler stammered. I was told." "You were told what you wanted to hear," the detective interrupted. The room felt electric. For a split second, everything was still. My mother's face twisted with rage and disbelief. "You needed us," she spat. I met her gaze steadily. "I needed parents," I said. "Not predators." As they were let out, my father looked back at me once, stunned, exposed. And in that moment, beneath the chaos, beneath the flashing badges and shouted commands, I felt something unexpected. Not triumph. Not revenge. Freedom. Because I had just done the one thing they never believed I could do. I had saved myself. In the harsh white light of that medical office, with my parents restrained and stunned, the final piece of the illusion shattered. The assistant district attorney stepped into the room, Ethan's supervisor, a composed woman in a navy suit I recognized from local news interviews. "We have recordings, documented intent, and now attempted execution," she said evenly. "And doctor," her eyes shifted to Kessler, "a nearly signed fraudulent incapacity certificate." Dr. Kessler's hands trembled. "This wasn't supposed to happen." My mother let out a sharp, broken laugh. "She manipulated you. She's unstable, she—" "Enough," the prosecutor cut in. My father finally found his voice. "We were protecting her, she's grieving, she can't handle that estate alone." I stepped forward then. "Stop saying that," I said quietly. They both looked at me like I had just spoken a foreign language. "She's confused," my mother insisted, turning to the officers. "You don't understand how fragile she's been." The prosecutor held up a printed transcript. "Understand that you discussed sedative dosage increases," she said flatly. "We understand that you coordinated a false medical declaration, and we understand that the financial assets involved are substantial." Silence. My father's jaw tightened. "You tricked us." The words were almost childish. I met his gaze steadily. "You tried to drug me." My mother's composure cracked entirely. "You ungrateful girl," she screamed. "After everything we've done for you." The officers guided them toward the door. "I may have lost a husband," I said, my voice steady and carrying through the room, "but I won't lose myself." The words settled like final punctuation. My mother twisted back toward me as they let her out. "You'll regret this," she shrieked, but her voice sounded smaller now, hollow. Dr. Kessler sank into a chair, pale and defeated. "I never intended." "You intended to sign," the prosecutor replied. "Intent is enough." Within minutes, the room that had almost become my legal cage turned into a crime scene. Statements were taken. Evidence logged. The teacup from earlier that day was sealed into a plastic bag. Ethan appeared briefly in the doorway. He didn't smile, he just nodded once. It was done. Outside, night had fully fallen over Charleston. Police lights painted the building in flashes of red and blue. I stood alone in the parking lot for a moment after everything cleared. The air felt different. Cleaner. For weeks, I had moved carefully in my own childhood home, calculating every word, every sip, every breath. Now there was nothing to calculate, only quiet. Marla's car pulled up beside me. She stepped out and wrapped her arms around me without asking permission. "It's over," she whispered. I rested my forehead against her shoulder. "Yes," I said softly. "It is." But as the adrenaline drained from my body, grief returned, not for my parents, not for what they'd done, but for the family I had thought I had. Daniel had once told me, "You're stronger than you think." Ev, standing there under the flashing lights, I finally believed him. I hadn't just protected his legacy. I had protected my mind, my autonomy, my future, and that was worth more than any inheritance. If you've ever had someone try to rewrite your reality or take control of your life under the disguise of care, tell me in the comments how you found your strength. And if you believe that dignity is something no one has the right to steal, stay with me, because the final chapter isn't about revenge. It's about rebuilding. 2 weeks later, I stood in my childhood bedroom with an empty suitcase and no hesitation left. The house felt smaller now, quieter. Word had spread quickly through Charleston. My parents had been formally charged. Dr. Kessler's medical license was under review. Neighbors who once waved politely now watched through curtains. But none of that mattered to me anymore. I zipped the suitcase closed and carried it downstairs for the last time. The hallway photos were still there, school portraits, family beach trips, Christmas mornings that now felt staged. I paused only briefly at one of Daniel and me on our wedding day, tucked awkwardly into a frame that had always seemed too small for him. "I'm going home," I whispered to the memory. "Not here, not anymore." Sullivan's Island greeted me with salt air and open horizon. Daniel's beachfront house, no, my house, stood with wide windows facing the Atlantic. Pale blue shutters. A wraparound porch he'd insisted on building himself. The moment I unlocked the door, a breeze moved through the hallway like a quiet welcome. I stepped inside slowly. No creaking tension. No whispers behind doors, just space. Sunlight spilled across hardwood floors. The living room opened toward the ocean, waves rolling in steady rhythm as if they had always been waiting. I set my suitcase down and walked barefoot to the back deck. The water stretched endlessly before me. For the first time since the funeral, I cried openly, not from fear, not from betrayal, but from release. I kept it safe, I murmured into the wind. Daniel had built this life quietly, thoughtfully, for me, and I had defended it. A car door slammed behind me. Please tell me you're not unpacking alone, Marla's voice called out. I turned to see her walking up the sandy path with 2 plastic cups and a bottle of wine tucked under her arm. I brought reinforcements, she grinned. I laughed, an actual laugh, surprising even myself. She handed me a cup and raised hers. To fresh starts and seaside sunsets. I clinked my cup gently against hers. To not being fragile, she smirked. You were never fragile. We sat on the porch steps, the ocean breeze tangling our hair. You know, she said after a moment, most people would have crumbled. I almost did, I admitted, but you didn't. No, I watched the waves roll in. I just realized something. What's that? Grief doesn't make you weak, it makes you visible, and some people see visibility as opportunity. Marla nodded thoughtfully. But opportunity goes both ways, she added. I smiled slowly. The house still needed furniture arranged. Papers signed, paint touched up. Life reorganized, but it was mine, fully, no manipulation attached. No conditions hidden beneath concern, just ownership in every sense of the word. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting the sky in shades of pink and gold, I felt something settle inside me. Peace. Not the naive kind, the earned kind. The kind that comes after you've stood in a white room and refused to be erased. If you've ever had to walk away from the very people who were supposed to protect you, I want to know, where are you rebuilding your life right now? Tell me in the comments. And if this story reminded you that strength can look quiet and still be unstoppable, don't forget to like and share. Because sometimes the strongest revenge isn't destruction. It's survival with dignity intact. 1 year later, on a warm spring morning on Sullivan's Island, I walk barefoot along the shoreline before the world fully wakes up. The ocean doesn't ask questions. It doesn't gaslight. It doesn't pretend concern while calculating your worth. It just moves forward. So do I wear linen now more than black. My skin carries sun instead of sleeplessness. The house Daniel built is no longer a refuge from fear, it's simply home. 3 days a week, I drive into Mount Pleasant to teach at the local Women's Resource Center. It started small, just a workshop on recognizing financial manipulation, then another on legal literacy, then self-defense classes in the evenings. Why are you so passionate about this? One woman asked me last month, her voice barely above a whisper. I smiled gently. Because nobody teaches us that control can wear a loving face. The room had gone quiet after that. My parents' case resolved quietly. Plea agreements, probation, court-ordered restitution. I didn't attend the final hearing. Closure doesn't always require a front-row seat. Sometimes it requires distance. Marla still brings wine on Fridays. We sit on the porch and watch the tide come in. You know they talk about you, she teased once. Who does? Half the county. Quiet widow outsmarts her own parents. I shook my head. I didn't outsmart them. No, I just stopped underestimating myself. That's the truth of it. Every morning before I head back inside, I pause at the edge of the water and let it touch my feet. You don't need a crowd to reclaim your power, I whisper to the sea, because I stood alone at a grave once. Alone in a hallway. Alone in a white medical room. And every time, I chose not to disappear. If there's one thing I want you to take from my story, it's this. Dignity isn't something someone grants you. It's something you defend. So tell me, if you were standing at the edge of your own turning point, would you shrink or would you rise? Write it in the comments. I'm listening.